Hey guys, hope everything's going well. Just wanted to make a quick video to explain the chymotrypsin mechanism before your exam, since I know some of you were struggling with it. So without further ado, let's dive right in. Before we get into the actual mechanism, I want to talk to you guys about some relevant features in the active site, just to orient ourselves. So why don't we start over here with this thing labeled HP, hydrophobic pocket. The hydrophobic pocket is one of these things in the active site that helps specify what the substrate is going to be. Hydrophobic pocket indicates that it has some liking for hydrophobic things. We can remember that chymotrypsin is a protease, meaning it cleaves peptides. And so we can infer from that that it likes peptides or amino acid residues that have hydrophobic groups. So we can think about the amino acids that have hydrophobic R groups. In this case, we've got phenylalanine, which is a big, bulky hydrophobic R group. And then there are lots of other ones we can think about. Tryptophan, for example, big, bulky hydrophobic R group. So this hydrophobic pocket will hold the R groups of these hydrophobic amino acids, and that's how chymotrypsin knows where to cut between these hydrophobic residues. Moving on, up here we have this thing labeled the OA hole, oxyanion hole. The oxyanion hole helps orient the substrate. So as you can see, we've got these hydrogen bond interactions going on here between these H's and this oxygen on the carbonyl group. And they help keep this carbonyl in place. Why do we want to keep the carbonyl where it is? It's because we're going to eventually try to attack this carbon right here, which I have with the red dot, to break apart this peptide bond right here. So we're going to attack this carbon, and so having this carbonyl held in place in this oxyanion hole helps us make sure that we're attacking in the right place. So this hydrophobic pocket, this oxyanion hole, orient and specify the substrate. Okay, now that we've described how the substrate stays in place and how we know what the substrate is, we're ready to move on to the active site residues that are key for catalysis. How are we actually going to accomplish the job of cutting this peptide apart? So we have serine, we have aspartic acid, we have histidine. Let's go through the properties of these guys. Serine is pretty small, we can see. We've got our OH here on the end, it's polar, neutral. And we have aspartic acid down here. Aspartic acid, by the name, is acidic, means it holds a negative charge under certain pHs in the body. And then lastly, we've got histidine up here. Histidine is basic, meaning it holds a positive charge sometimes, and we can expect that there's going to be some acidic basic interactions going on between this aspartic acid and this histidine. We can already see off the bat that there's some hydrogen bonding going on. This histidine has a proton here that aspartic acid is hydrogen bonding to this oxygen over here. So that's going to be interesting in this mechanism. And then the one last thing, and perhaps the most important thing before we actually get into the meat of this, is our peptide. These little squiggly lines over here just indicate that there's more on the outside, and we're only focusing on this particular peptide bond, and this R group, this phenylalanine, is what's holding everything together in place. Now you guys have the picture down, let's move into the mechanism itself. So how are we going to start this? We want to attack this carbonyl somehow. And over here, this histidine and aspartic acid have this interaction going on where this aspartic acid is pulling away the proton. And so this nitrogen over here wants to get a proton somehow because this one's getting taken away. So what's going to happen is we've got this lone pair on the nitrogen coming up here, grabbing the hydrogen from the serine, and now our oxygen's a little lonely. So this bond is going to come up and attack this carbon, and then kick this double bond up. That's the first step in catalysis. So what does that result in? Let's clean this up a little bit. So the first thing is that we grabbed a proton, right? So let's draw our H here. And this nitrogen now has 4 bonds. So it has a positive charge. What happened next? So we attacked the carbonyl. And so now our oxygen from the serine is bonded to the carbonyl carbon. Make that a little nicer here. But wait, carbon can't have 5 bonds, which is why we kicked the double bond up in the first place, making this a single bond. Apologies for my drawing skills here. So we have this carbon has 4 bonds to tetrahedral, but it's bonded to serine. We have our positively charged histidine, and there's still this hydrogen bonding thing going on. But is this what we want? No, we want to get rid of half of the peptide, meaning that we want to cut it in 2. But there's a pretty easy way to do that. So remember when we kicked off the double bond and moved the electrons up to the oxygen, we gave it a negative charge because the singly bonded oxygen has a negative charge. And so we can kick these electrons back down like that. Now we have a double bond here. Carbon can't have 5 bonds. We need to kick something off. And look, conveniently, we can kick off this peptide bond. Where is it going to go? We're going to use these electrons to pick up the hydrogen we gave to histidine originally, and then kick this back onto the nitrogen. So what does this look like? So first thing we'll do is redraw our double bond. Redraw a double bond. That gets rid of this negative charge up on the oxygen. Now we can't have 5 bonds to carbon. We kicked off this peptide bond here and used that to pick up the hydrogen from the histidine. That not only gets rid of the positive charge on the histidine, gets rid of the positive charge on the histidine. It makes this guy an NH2, and this is now free. So we've done it. We've cut the peptide, haven't we? But it's still attached to serine. It's still stuck in the enzyme's active site. So we want to get rid of that. So I'm going to erase this guy for now, but he's still here. And let's move back into the mechanism. So we have our histidine with our N here, which is now neutral. We have our serine still bonded to the peptide, and we want to get rid of this bond. So we're going to go through a similar mechanism to get rid of the serine. We got rid of the peptide bond first, now let's get rid of the serine. How are we going to do that? Well, we're going to make use of something that's really common in biological processes and just in the body and organisms in general, which is water. Water. So our lone pair on the nitrogen, which is still here, is going to come over and pick up this hydrogen because you still have this hydrogen bonding interaction going on between histidine and aspartic acid. Now this oxygen has like a partial negative because as this nitrogen is taking away the hydrogen. And so what's going to happen? It's going to come over, it's going to attack the carbonyl. What are we going to do now? Carbon can't have 5 bonds, and so we're going to kick this double bond up. So what does this result in? A couple of things. First of all, we're going to give histidine back that proton, giving it a positive charge. Now we've bonded our OH from our water to this. And now we have to kick off this double bond because carbon can't have 5 bonds, giving this guy a negative. So now we have another tetrahedral intermediate. And now we can use the same concept from before to get rid of serine. So we have our lone pair here, kick it down. And what are we going to kick off this time? Serine. Where's this bond going to go? It's going to pick up the hydrogen that we gave to histidine. And so finally, this is what our system is going to look like. We've kicked this lone pair down. So we've got a double bond. We can get rid of this negative charge. Now we've gotten rid of this bond between the serine and the carbonyl carbon. And we're picking up this hydrogen, getting rid of this positive charge on the histidine, picking up the hydrogen. So does this look like anything familiar to you? This is the exact same active site that we started with. The serine is back to its normal state. The aspartic acid never changed, and the histidine is back to its normal state. But what do we have here? We have this half of the peptide. And remember what we left earlier. We left this half. So we've done it. We've separated it into two. We've got this half and this half. So we've done it. So that is the catalytic mechanism for chymotrypsin. I hope that was helpful for you guys, and feel free to let me know if you have any questions before the exam next week. All right.